Welcome back to the Backcountry PA podcast. This is episode 140, and on this one, we sit down to DIETER KOCHAN, the owner and founder of Stealth Custom Hunting e-bikes. We talk pretty much all about e-bikes on this one. We talk about how DIETER, how his season went this year, hunting multiple states, how he got into hunting, bow hunting primarily, how he started an e-bike company, and we talk about the brakes, the engine, the frame, the tires, the maintenance that goes behind keeping up with an e-bike to make sure it's running properly, what type of motor / battery you need for certain types of areas. It was really informative because I know nothing about e-bikes. Ethan knew nothing about e-bikes, and we asked some questions that maybe some people would be like, hey, I already knew that. But there's a lot of information in this episode about e-bikes, so give it a listen. Go check him out on Instagram, but remember to keep hunting, keep fishing, keep your tradition, and always enjoy the freaking process. This area, I've scouted this game lands pretty good the last couple years. Right by my house here, it's like 10, 20 minutes away from my house. I got some good buck on there, but I just don't know where they go. I have no idea. And it's very heavily pressured, all that kind of stuff. Ladder stands, climbers, blinds everywhere. Yeah. Good ag fields around too that they go to. And it looks like they timbered out a few areas. There's small trees just everywhere in some spots, nowhere to hang a tree stand. And I never scouted it. So I went to this area. I was like, you know what? This is right by the road, right by access. Just going to look at it. First, I walk in there and I found a heavy trail, like a runway right away. I'm like, all right. So I followed it, came to 3 scrapes right away underneath the same types of trees. I was like, all right, this is pretty good. This is good. So I put my camera up right there, and then I kept following this runway. Dude, rubs up to my chest. It's on big trees, little trees, just rubbed to shit. And there's scrapes all along this trail. And then I find a good bed. And then you can see the road from where this bed is. I'm sitting in this bed and you can see that just cars driving by. Yeah. And then across from where this bed is a parking lot. So he's looking at the parking lot while he beds there and watches all the cars just drive by.
Okay.
Yeah. So
yeah, those are cool. That's kind of once we get into the bikes and that, but I had a couple spots like that. And the big thing was being able to park somewhere totally different. Because if you're parked in that parking lot for 2 days in a row, somebody's probably going to start sniffing around. And I was just hiding your truck and doing goofy stuff like that. Because I think guys would be the trend is everybody wants to talk about 2-3 miles deep. But there's so many good spots that are close.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. This game lands, there's parking spots. I would say the whole thing is surrounded by parking. So you can't get away from it. And even if you do the whole 2-mile radius or 100 yards, the average person walks maybe 100 to 300 yards in, the average hunter, just an average guy. They'll walk in 300 yards. And you can't, when you do that, the circumference of the parking area, 300 yards, there's no spot that's green on the map. So you gotta find that the spots overlooked.
Yeah.
And that's what I found the last couple times I went out is, these areas that are close to parking lots seem to have good activity.
Are you in an area with a lot of hills, or are you flatter?
No, we're more rolling hills, at least down below. So there's nothing the highest elevation is a couple 100 feet.
I can actually check right now.
It's really not much.
Before I had a cabin up in Clinton County. Ethan has one in Potter County, and our highest elevation up there is by my cabin. It was 2,100 feet. I think was 21 or 23 was the highest.
Yeah, because when I go up to the top of the mountain where I'm at, that's 2,300 highest in elevation, and that's what did I say, 6 or 9 mile drive going up like logging roads, and you go through a switchback. So like those are the mountains. But then down here, I could walk straight through game lands and have zero difficulty like going up over any hills or anything.
Yeah. It's so around here, the game lands we're talking about, the highest is like 700 feet.
700, yeah.
So not very. It's
not steep. At all.
No, it's like a gradual incline at most. Like you'll have once in a while, like where I was at last year on that game lands, there's a hill that goes maybe, a really steep up right away, but it's not hard to get up it at all. It's very thick. But yeah, that's what we're dealing with around here is ag field, heavy pressure.
Yeah.
Little pieces. The biggest one near us is 8,000.
Okay. Yeah. I hunted New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut. So some of the eastern stuff. I've driven through Pennsylvania quite a bit that's back when I was playing hockey. I played against the teams like the Philadelphia, like the Phantoms and like Wilkes-Barre and stuff like that, like mostly in the minors. So I was living out east a lot.
Yeah.
But it's nice. Yeah. It's nice country out there.
It's beautiful, especially up like the areas you're talking about, like up on the top part of the PA right there. And then you come down to Philly. Like Philly's like, I don't want to go to Philly. Like that's
just avoid the
bad area. But yeah, like up towards like the northern tier, like that part is like beautiful. Honestly, like I could driving up to my cabin. It was beautiful, especially in the fall when all the leaves are changing colors and like you're just winding roads through the mountains the whole way back to my cabin. Like you're going 70 on these roads and you're not seeing a single car. It's great.
Yeah.
But right off the bat, do you want to introduce yourself to us, to the listeners, who you are, how you got in hunting, all that kind of stuff?
Sure. So my name's DIETER KOCHAN. I'm 48 years old. I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin. I've been bow hunting since high school. So that was the late 80s. So got some time under my belt. I played a lot of hockey growing up. I ended up playing college hockey and then playing professionally for 10 years. And that kind of brought me all over the country, where I lived in Connecticut, New York, Massachusetts, Maine. So a bunch of different eastern states. And just because of playing hockey, I was forced to adopt kind of a mobile hunting style just because I didn't know where I was going to be. So started saddle hunting way back in 2005.
Before saddle hunting was a big thing?
Back then you were embarrassed to tell anybody. Well, it's getting to be that point again, but back then people thought you were crazy for what you're doing, but there just weren't the options for like lighter tree stands and stuff like that if you're going to kind of try to bounce around and do different things that way. So yeah, I got early in on saddle hunting and mobile hunting and just grew and grew as a hunter. And now I live in upper Michigan in the UP. So we're way up north near Lake Superior.
Okay.
We get a lot of snow up here, and I usually hunt 2 or 3 states a year, and just love bow hunting. And I don't gun hunt or anything. I'll just keep bow hunting during the gun season and just love to get after it.
That's awesome. So when you first got into it, like, did you say it was your family that got you into it, or how did you get introduced to hunting?
It was actually a buddy I was playing hockey with. We started fishing a lot together. Would have been my sophomore year of high school. And then his family bow hunted. So I started just tagging along with them and, hunting public land. And it was good because like his dad knew a lot and their family knew a lot. So they were teaching me, but then I was still basically on my own. So it was just kind of going out into the woods, picking your own trees. And back then, you're climbing a tree any way you could and then sitting in like a crotch or whatever. And I think I only saw maybe 2 deer that first year, but I was hooked nonetheless and kept hunting through high school. And then when I went to college up in Marquette, Michigan, kept hunting there, and over Christmas break when I'd go back home to Madison. So just it's been a passion of mine for quite a while, and
Yeah.
continued hunting all through while I was playing hockey. And then once I was done with hockey, it was nice where I could finally really dedicate large chunks of time to just bow hunting.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, what was like, because you only saw a couple deer the first year. So what do you think hooked you into it? Like, was it just being out in nature? Was it those 2 deer you saw?
I think it's probably just the challenge. I mean, if I had like a deer totally pegged down, like totally patterned on a trail camera where I was 100%
Mm-hmm.
sure I was going to kill him that night, I probably would be way less interested than if I was just going into a new area where, the unknown and who knows what you're going to see. So, I'm definitely not into the, having guarantees of any. So I'd rather fail my way than have a buddy put me in a tree where
Mm-hmm.
you're guaranteed to shoot a big one. I mean, I like the challenge, and I think failure's probably the greatest motivating factor, and
Mhm.
that more than anything, probably bow hunting or in life or sports or anything. So you have to hate more to lose than like to win, I think.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely bow hunting. Failures are more common than the successes. Like, you know what I mean? Like you can pattern this deer down all you want, but then I say it a million times, but like if he goes right instead of left, it's like you might not, someone else might get him, and then that's, it's not necessarily a failure. I mean, failure is different in everyone's eyes, but it, bow hunting is hard. The early season is very hard.
I think that's probably why I don't gun hunt that much. Like, I'd rather the challenge and the, less likelihood for success, I guess. And
Yeah.
that's why I kind of laugh when guys talk about, I passed this deer, passed that deer. It's basically, you didn't give yourself an opportunity to fail. But I mean, there's a million things that can go wrong. It's not like anything's a guarantee out there, where if you decided you're going to take that buck, that it was all going to work perfect for you. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I could imagine the challenge just of bow hunting during gun season. Because like even like in Pennsylvania, when it's gun season, they're running, they're moving, you hear gunshots, and then you're out there with a bow. I mean, talk about, you have slim odds during the actual archery season. Bow or gun season is probably even less.
yeah, it just goes back to that. I mean, especially if you have like a certain buck you're after. I mean, I would never, chase them all through archery and then shoot them with a gun. I mean, it just wouldn't feel
fair.
something wrong about it. But
Yeah.
that's just me. I have nothing against gun hunting, and in gun season, you just you have to change your tactics a little bit. Especially up here, you're allowed to bait, so you can kind of pattern what's going to happen, and if you get far enough away, you can kind of get some unmolested deer where they're going to act fairly normally. So,
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do agree with you. Like if you're chasing after one buck particular in archery, and then like you come as a rifle and you set up in the same spot and you can see him further away and you take the shot, it's like, that kind of takes away from the whole chase mentality of if you're after him during arch season. Like I feel like you chase him during arch season, and then like come rifle season, if you see him, you let him pass, and then you just shoot on doe patrol. You're on doe patrol then, like you just take doe. Like you just
hope he makes it to late season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or do what you do and just arch season hunt all season. That's the best way to do it.
Yeah. Take it out every day. Don't matter. Don't matter.
Yep.
So before we get into e-bikes, because Ethan and I really don't know anything about e-bikes.
Nope.
Let's break down your 2022-2023 season. Like, how did it go for you?
Yeah, it went pretty good. I started in Kentucky. I'd never been down there, so I just picked a spot on a map and just went down there and hunted for a week. And I got on some good deer. Couldn't really figure them out on the food, but I was, jumped a couple and had some on camera and just couldn't close the deal in Kentucky. So, but it was fun down there. I love getting out early. I'll either try to go to Kentucky or North Dakota or Nebraska, whatever opens early. So then came back and I hunted a little bit in Michigan. And then finally, like late October, I usually go to Wisconsin, was able to go to Wisconsin. And I think all over the country is a tough rut. It was warm and hot, and eventually kind of made a move with the e-bike where I got further away than I normally hunted in this area, and got into kind of a wet swamp. And it was one of those miserable walks out there where you're in knee-high water, but got out there a hot day, and they were chasing in this thicket, and I was able to shoot I think it was an 11-pointer, like right at closing time there. And came back to Michigan, was actually on a good buck, had him figured out, got a nice change in weather, a little bit of a misty day, and he came in. I ended up taking the shot, hit him high, and nothing really for blood on the arrow, and ended up getting him on camera a couple days ago. So a couple days after I took the shot at him. So, I mean, that was a little bit disappointing, and kept effort all the way to the late season. I was on another good buck, like late December, where I had him kind of pegged down on an acorn flat, and it was looking to be where I was gonna, I had him pretty figured out where I was thinking I think I for sure kill this thing. And then he ended up shedding. So that was the end of my season. So I ended up getting one in Wisconsin.
Wow, man. But that's also has to be a little relieving too. Like it sucks that you missed the buck, but it's also kind of a little relieving that he was still alive, and like he didn't like run for miles and miles. And then eventually he was, bedded down and then caught up by coyotes because he was so wounded he couldn't get up. Like I'm sure that was a little relieving too, because then next year you can chase after him once again.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get him on camera again, because I didn't think the shot was that high, but obviously, there's just from the arrow told me that it wasn't good.
Yeah.
And then the pictures I got were of him, actively working scrapes and that. So So I'm optimistic he's fine, and hopefully get a chance to go after him again this year.
Yeah, you got history with him, and you'll know if we get pictures of him, be like, oh, that one's got a hole in him. That's the one I shot. So you already know, who it is.
Yeah, just aim a little lower in that hole.
Yep.
Yeah. If he comes in the same way, look at that hole and then go down.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I mean, that's one thing about hunting. Like, we learn from our mistakes. It happens. Like I missed one a while back. It was a dumb shot, and I missed him, tracked him for 700 yards, and never found him. Now I don't know if he survived or not, because I wasn't running trail cams at that time. So it's like one of those things. I wish I knew if he was still alive, because it'd be relieving.
Yeah.
One of those things that haunts you for weeks and maybe months and years to go if you don't know for sure if he survived or not.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But that's at least you got one down this year. Do you shoot many doe? Do you do doe patrol at all?
I did shoot a doe.
Okay.
So I did get one doe. So
okay.
I mean, I love deer meat and eating deer, and for sure shooting deer. So if I can shoot them, I like to shoot them. So
yeah, definitely. You always have to have, if you want to chase, I feel like if you want to chase after this big buck, you also have to have that, willingness to shoot doe too. Like I know a lot of people that buy tags just to let them go, let doe tags go so other people don't shoot doe. It's like I don't understand that, because like you're managing the herd. You need to manage the herd to be able to have these bucks stick around so they have enough food to forage on and to eat. Like if you have doe, a buck's not going to go and eat the same food that a doe's going to eat, because he doesn't want to compete with that doe to eat the food.
Yeah, and I mean, you definitely learn a lot about, shot placement and how much you can move, and what different angles and different tree stands height. I mean, you learn so much from every deer you're able to harvest, and especially guys starting out. I mean, if they may or may not be interested in just shooting big bucks, but if you're just going to be going after bigger bucks, then make sure you're shooting as many does as you can, because I mean, you're going to gain a lot of experience with the shot, with the tracking, with every part of it.
Absolutely. I mean, I love shooting doe. I would love to shoot. I shot one doe this year with a rifle. My first time going out with my bow, I missed the doe underneath because I had the wrong kind of broadheads on. And that I learned from that, and then I come out back and I'm shooting my bow and I'm like, oh, I wonder what these fixed blades are like again. So I put them on because I had everything, I was dialed in with my sight. Everything was dialed in. So I put the fixed blades on right underneath the target. I was like, that explains a lot. That explains why I missed that doe.
It was a clean miss, though.
Yeah, clean miss. Yeah. And she just stood there. The log was not, the log was harmed in the making of that.
The log was harmed. Right through the tree.
Yep. So we have you on here because you own an e-bike company. So do you want to let the people know what your e-bike company is first, right off the bat?
Sure. So it's Stealth Hunting E-Bikes,
Okay.
www.stealthhuntingebikes.com.
Okay.
And then same thing, Stealth Hunting E-Bikes on Facebook and Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of started, like I was like a lot of kids. I mean, I grew up on a bicycle, and we didn't have a ton of money. So I mean, I was using my bike to ride everywhere I needed to go, probably through most of high school and that. So, we're always, when we're younger, ripping apart bikes and that. And then my father-in-law was a Trek dealer. So I was putting together bikes with him and doing different things with bikes. And then as it evolved with hunting, I finally, with hunting a lot of public land and trying to gain, a bit of an advantage over, the other people that you're, I guess, kind of competing against. I started utilizing a bike, just a standard fat tire bike, and ended up having some success utilizing that type of bike. And then that involved into doing a lot of research about e-bikes, and I was, I wanted to get a quality product, and I was looking at, I guess, the big three in the industry for hunting bikes, especially, would be Rambo, Quiet Cat, and Baku. And I was looking at those bikes and just kind of, I knew bike parts and bike components. I was like, well, where the heck's all this? Where's the cost coming from? And my original plan was just to build my own bike where you can buy a mid-drive kit and a battery and just put it onto the bike and go that route. And kind of, as I went down that rabbit hole, I got in contact with a couple different companies who actually supply those big name companies, and I was able to get parts and frames and bikes from them. And it just kind of slowly grew into a business where originally it was just my bike supplying, my brother and my dad and then buddies and stuff, and then started kind of selling them to where I saw that there's kind of a gap in the market where, I could offer fairly close, if not identical bikes for thousands of dollars less.
Right.
So that's kind of where it evolved.
Yeah. I mean, you manufacture them, like you get everything and you put them together and then you ship them out directly to the customer, right? Like I think that's
there's a lot of guys who are drop shipping kind of bikes where they're fully assembled bikes, and so they're never touching the bike or doing it. And I started kind of down that road, but there were some inferior parts on the bikes, like a lot of the bikes that are getting imported, to where I didn't want to give that type of a product to the guys who were trusting me buying bikes. So I was like, I'm not going to drop ship bikes. Every bike comes to me. I tear it down. I switch the parts that need to be switched for, especially for hunters who are particularly hard on equipment. So getting the parts, especially like the headsets was one of the big things where, 99% of the bikes that are getting imported have the same headset, and it's a cheap headset. It'll most likely fail within the first year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I'm swapping all those out with, the highest quality possible headsets, and upgrading the brakes and extra large, extra grip pedals for guys, your muddy boots and all that. You don't want to be slipping off the pedals. So little things like that I know that are features that hunters want and need is kind of, I'm only looking to sell my bikes to hunters, which is kind of changed how I've developed some products, actually, where I'm the only company that sells a single speed 1,000-watt mid-drive e-bike.
Okay.
All the other bikes have derailleurs on them because 90% of the consumers want, a bike to shift gears and maybe get some exercise, and they're concerned with top end speed, where I learned early on that my customers wanted a bike that's going to be able to go up pretty much any hill, and they weren't concerned with going 28 miles an hour, and they had no interest in pedaling. So, I could build a bike that just has that one gear where it has a max speed of 16 miles per hour, but you don't have to worry about breaking derailleurs on corn stalks or driving through taller grass or breaking it on a branch or log or something. So it's kind of more of a bulletproof design specifically for hunters.
Okay. All right. So let's start with the parts on an e-bike. So you said the headset. What exactly is the headset?
So the headset's the bearing group in the front of the bike that basically holds the front fork to the handlebars.
Okay.
So that's a part that, a lot of guys are banging on the front of the bike going down hills and stuff like that, where if that part gets some slop in it, you could have some issues. So if anybody's ever felt a bike and you hold the front brake and shake it and you feel some play in the front of the bike, that's a headset that's starting to go.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I don't know much about bikes even. So that's completely new to me. Like, I have a mountain bike that I got from my grandfather, and that's what I use roughly most of the time. But, I find it's harder to get up hills, especially even if you're on like the lowest speed you can go and get up that hill. It's like, I don't think I'm out of shape, but yet still, it's rough sometimes.
Yeah.
And then if you have gear on that too, it's like you're climbing up hills with that.
And that's where the gearing comes into play. Like, my bikes are all geared to where they'll climb steep hills. Like, I think my worst climbing bikes climb hills as good as like the Baku Mule, and the Mule's well respected as a bike, guys chasing elk and everything like that. So my worst climbing bike will climb as good as the Mule, and then I have other bikes that'll climb better than that. And that all has to do with the gearing. So like, if you're just pedaling a bike, you have gears that are very difficult to pedal and then gears that are very easy to pedal. Well, you want to have those easy pedaling gears to make it easier on the motor to climb up a hill. And you do that by having really small front chain rings and then larger rear cogs. And the combination of those two give you the mechanical advantage to where, like, mid drives, I don't care what anybody says, a mid drive will outclimb a hub motor. And that has to do with the mechanical advantage. And then a hub motor can only generate 80 Newton meters of torque, compared to a mid drive can generate 160 Newton meters of torque. And that low end torque is what climbs the hill.
Okay.
So that's the big difference in the e-bikes, is you have hub drives and mid drives. And that's, typically the hub drives were less expensive. Some of them are creeping up there in price now, but you're always going to be better if your number one goal is climbing hills. I would definitely recommend a mid drive. And I actually don't sell hub drives because I know that they're they're going to be prone to getting burnt out.
Yeah.
Motors and the controllers. And it's similar to, like, if anybody's done a lot of construction, use different drills. Like if you take a cheap drill and try to drill a big bit through a large board, you know, the drill can spin real fast, but as soon as it's under a load where it's forced to spin slower, it doesn't have the torque to spin. And if you keep hammering on the throttle, you burn the drill.
Right.
Compared to if you have a totally different drill, one of those giant drills where it has like a side handle on it that'll pretty much spin you around. Well, that's torque.
Yeah.
So that's what you want when you're climbing a hill. When the motor gets a load on it, you need that torque to keep going. And the bikes, like even guys who don't bike with lots of hills, the bike doesn't know the difference between a hill, the weight of the rider, or a trailer or anything like that. It's all just work for the bike.
Right.
So you're always going to be better with more torque anytime you ask the motor to do work.
Okay. That's like a Hemi. We're comparing it to engines.
It's like a Ford Ranger versus a Dodge, you know, Hemi 2500. I mean, they're both trucks.
Right.
But there's a big difference when you start asking them to do work.
Yeah, when you start pulling a camper with that Ranger, and then you pull one with a Dodge Ram, you're going to feel the difference with both those.
And that's the torque.
Yes, exactly. All right, so let's talk about the frame. The frame of most e-bikes. What are they made out of? Like, what is yours made out of, and how much does it weigh?
All the frames are pretty similar. Like if you buy, you know, like if you buy a bike through somebody like me or somebody else, the advantage would be like the motor's integrated into the frame and the battery's usually integrated into the frame, compared to if you decide to make one on your own, you're going to attach, you know, if it's a mid-drive, you're going to attach it to where the pedal's attached to the bike, and then you're going to have to add on a battery on top of so it's a less streamlined process. All the bikes are, I think it's 6061 aluminum, I want to think. So they're all made out of aluminum. And you know, the big difference, like if you buy like a standard bike brand, like a Trek e-bike,
right,
you'll have a really good quality frame components and everything like that, but you'll have a small motor and a small battery, compared to like if you're buying, you know, a hunting e-bike, you're going to get a really big motor, a really big battery, and then, you know, the frame might be a little bit heavier than if you bought like a Trek frame. But the frames are all warranted, I think, for like 5 years. So I've never had anybody have any issues with frames. And e-bikes are heavy. I mean, they're going to be, the ones I sell, they could be 70, 80 pounds in that ballpark range.
Okay. And you, like, it's because, you know, you have the big name brands, all that kind of stuff. And like, how comparable is yours to a big name brand? You know, like a Baku or a Rambo or one of those brands.
So, I mean, they're really close. And like, I just started selling a bike that's basically identical to the Baku Mule. Like every part on it is exactly the same.
All right.
And with talking with the distributor, I think they might even be made in the same factory. So it's pretty much the exact same bike. And I sell it for $3,600 and Baku sells there for $5,800.
Yeah. Big price difference. Yeah.
And if you look part per part is exactly the same.
Okay.
Just the name on it.
It's just
I've always said that you pay more for the name than you do for.
And I think Baku's well respected and they have good customer service.
Right.
But then they're like, if you're online a lot, I mean, there's guys constantly complaining about some of the other companies' customer service. So you're not, other than the name, you're not getting a whole lot for it. And you know, I don't have any other bikes that are like so identical where if you put them next to each other, but like I have the exact same motors and batteries as all those companies. I'm putting the exact same parts on them. You know, they might have bikes that have this part better or that part better, and I might have a couple parts better on mine. So there's a give and take, but generally, if you looked at a comparable bike from Rambo, Quiet Cat, or Baku, mine are going to be $2,000 cheaper in that range.
Yeah, and you're using the same kind of parts they're using. So I mean, there's, like Ethan said, I think you're paying for more of the name, and you're paying because they have a bunch of employees. Like they got to pay the employees too to manufacture this bike. When you're really you're doing most of this yourself.
Yeah, I'm doing all the assembly, and I've looked at, like, you can't, and with those bikes you can't, if you have a local dealer down the road, it's not their fault, because I've seen basically the dealer price for a dealer of one of those 3 bikes is basically what I sell my bikes for. So the dealers aren't marking them up. The dealers are buying the bikes for a higher cost, and for the dealer to make money, they have to raise it again. So that's where the it's a classic cut out the middleman type of deal where you can save quite a bit of money.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
How much weight can they handle? Well, you got a big boy on that bike with all his gear. If he has I know they're light. A lot of them are light, but you got to hang on his gun or his bow. What's that max? Before
I think the bikes are rated like 300, 350 in that ballpark. And bigger guys are going to be, a bigger guy, like I said, he's going to ask the bike to do more work, and they can be harder on some of the equipment. And, a lot of guys are talking about doing trailers and stuff like that. And it doesn't matter who you buy your bike for. If you ask the bike to do the same kind of work that you ask your 4-wheeler, stuff's gonna break, because I've had guys email me and they're like, hey, I want to be hauling a couple 100 pounds of corn every day. I'm like, yeah, it could do it, but long term, it is a bike. There's bike parts on it. So they're built, they can withstand quite a bit, but
yeah.
If you ask a bike to be a truck, then stuff can break. It's the same thing with your truck. If you ask your truck to do a whole, like if you have a Ford Ranger and you're going to be pulling that camper,
yeah, it's you're going to do some damage to it. Yeah, you're going to do some damage. So since we're on that topic, let's talk about the maintenance of it. Like when you're that big guy, you're pulling it, you're doing more than what you really should be doing with it. What kind of maintenance should you do for the engine or the brakes or the battery? Like how often should you charge a battery if you're doing all this?
So the batteries are lithium batteries. I buy the highest quality batteries. The good batteries go through testing where it's load testing and charger testing, to where, like, if anybody's read stuff online about e-bike batteries starting on fire, burning places down.
Yep.
A lot of those are low quality batteries. Most of the good batteries shouldn't do that. But if you try to buy a cheap battery, and the battery can be a big part of your expenditure. A battery could cost $1,000. So guys look at that and then they go buy a cheap battery. Well, the batteries are basically like, if you took a series of like AA batteries and ran them all together, like there's a bunch of different cells inside that battery. And if you start doing cheap welds and having it's the battery management system kind of running the whole thing, if you cut corners with those two things, then you can have a battery that can potentially start on fire. So that's one thing where, if guys are going to build their own bikes or whatever, don't skimp on the battery.
Right.
The motor itself, as long as you get, like, so I only sell 1,000-watt mid-drive motors. So those are the most powerful motors. So they're not going to be very inclined to burning up the motor. Like, the motor is so powerful that it'll if you put it under a load, it'll most likely break the chain or break something else before the motor kind of runs out of the ability to turn the crank.
Yeah.
So the motors have been around for a long time, have been, you know, stressed beyond belief, and they can handle it. So there's not a ton of maintenance really. I mean, you're going to your battery, depending on the size, you're going to charge it every couple days. You can get the smallest batteries I sell, you can probably get, 15, 20 miles just running the throttle in the hills and stuff like that. And then I have batteries that are probably 40% bigger than that can give you a little bit of range if, you're going out west or thinking you're going to be on the bike for a lot of miles. But most guys can get by with a smaller battery. And then it's just beyond the motor and the battery, it's just a bike.
Mm-hmm.
It's all like any of the other parts are just bike parts. Like, Rambo doesn't make any parts. Baku doesn't make any parts. Quiet Cat doesn't make any parts. They just buy motors, batteries, and attach them to a bunch of bike parts. So if you break any of the other parts, you can usually get it fixed. Some people are hesitant to work on e-bikes, but I mean, it's basically just a bike with a motor and a battery.
Right. Yeah. So there's no special kind of brakes they put on. Like if you have a mountain bike, it'd be those kind of brakes. I'm not even sure what kind of brakes are on an electric bike, on an e-bike.
Yeah, it's the same kind of brakes. I mean, the low end bikes will have mechanical disc brakes, and then the better bikes will have hydraulic disc brakes. And then the best bike brakes right now are 4-piston hydraulic brakes, and then it's the size of the rotors. So the cheapest bikes will have 160 millimeter rotors, and then the next step up's 180 millimeters, and then the best bikes have 203 millimeters. So, my bikes, I'm putting either 180s or 203 millimeters. So I put good brakes on the bikes, and my best bike has 4-piston 203 millimeter brakes.
Okay. All right. So is that like you have the grips, the brakes in the front and the back. You have both front and back brakes on e-bikes, right?
Correct.
Okay. And are your motors, like I know some have motors in the front and the back. Does yours have that where it's like the front and back wheels have motors on them?
So those would be hub motors.
Okay.
So some guys will have front and rear hub motors. So my motor's right in the middle of the bike.
Okay.
And my motor basically turns what the pedals would turn if you were pedaling. So then you get the mechanical advantage of being able to shift gears and make it easier for the bike to climb a hill.
Okay.
For example.
Yeah. What kind of hill are we talking that will climb with ease?
I posted one video where, like, we don't live in the mountains, but I drove the bike to the top of the ski hill with basically not pedaling.
Okay.
So, I mean, they'll go up like you'd be surprised what they'll go up.
It was like a black diamond course.
It was the easier. It wasn't the black diamond, but it was the easier hill.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've never really gone to anything where I thought, I'm going to go up that.
Right.
Whether it was pedaling or anything. I mean, you'd be surprised, especially with those 1,000-watt mid drives.
Mm-hmm.
Like as soon as you go below that to where there's 750-watt mid drives, and the problem with that is that motor only has 120 Newton meters of torque.
Okay.
So probably half the bikes I sell are guys who originally try to save a little bit money, buy a 750-watt mid-drive bike, and then they quickly realize that it can't climb what they think it should be able to climb.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they get their hands on 1,000-watt mid-drive, they're shocked what they can drive up. Like those bikes can climb.
We can get an e-bike to go up the pipeline
over
where your cabin was. That would be that pipeline is still to this day the worst thing to walk up. I genuinely hate. And did I do it every year? Yes, but it's the worst thing to walk up. So to have an e-bike that could just go right.
Yeah.
That would have been how many more miles we could have got in a day?
A lot more.
So many more, and a lot less sweating.
But PA does have laws on e-bikes, just like every other state does, I'm sure. But I found them and I want to read them here. First, it says an e-bike is a bicycle equipped with an electric motor that assists the rider when you're pedaling. The e-bikes are allowed on trails already open to traditional bicycles usage as long as users follow guidelines consistent with the Pennsylvania Vehicle Code that e-bikes weigh no more than 100 pounds, do not exceed 20 miles per hour using the motor, have motors that do not exceed 750 watts, have fully functional operable pedals. So that's pretty much states, forests, roads, and trails that are not open to biking, which would all prohibit e-bikes, included natural areas, designated hiking trails blazed with yellow or orange, trails or roads specifically marked closed to biking. So that's pretty much what PA has for e-bikes. So if it like we couldn't use 1,000-watt bike here in PA.
That's the national standard is what you've read.
Okay.
So the motors are fully programmable. So if you go into the settings, you can drop the max speed down to 20 miles per hour or less, and that drops the watts down to 750 watts. But you still have 160 Newton meters of torque.
Okay.
So the laws are terribly written, and they'll end up.
That's usually how a lot of things go. That's usually how a lot of things go. Yeah.
Yeah. So my day job, I'm a state trooper.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. So I understand, writing tickets, going to court, having to prove things in front of a magistrate or a judge. Mm-hmm. So if anybody wrote that ticket, you'd have to seize the bike as evidence and have an expert testify to how many watts it runs at.
Okay.
Because you can't prove it otherwise. It's the same thing, like even something as simple as a speeding ticket. There's case law that establishes that the officer has to go through this step, and have this training. And if you miss any of those things, then it's a bad ticket. Mm-hmm. So the e-bike laws are really weird to where for me to look at them, they're almost unenforceable because you can't, with the motors being programmable, you can't really say exactly how many watts they're running at. If they just stuck with the speed limit, that'd be fine. Mm-hmm. And if you go to Baku's website, they've long said that their 1,000-watt mid drives can either be class 1, 2, or 3 depending on if you go into the settings or not. So theoretically, if you go into the settings, it's a 750 watt. It's operating at 750 watts. Mm-hmm. It can't go over 20 miles per hour through the power of the motor. And then if you detach the throttle, you'd even be considered a class 1 e-bike. Okay. So it's going to be interesting as the laws get evaluated. And, I've kind of been watching to see if there's any case law. And case law is basically, your state Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court of the United States kind of establishes, okay, this is how these laws are going to be interpreted.
Right.
None of them have made it very far. There's a couple that are kind of in the works where, somebody was riding an e-bike and didn't have a driver's license. Mm-hmm. And if the officer wants to consider that bike a motor vehicle, then they'd obviously be violating the law and could be arrested. And then in a couple other situations, it was, guys, like if you had a gun on a bicycle, you can open carry a gun on a bicycle, but you can't open carry a handgun on a motor vehicle without a CCW permit.
Yep.
Some of those laws court rulings will eventually make their way up, and there'll be more guidance. But I mean, as far as what I think, I mean, I think that going into the settings, you'd be in compliance, but you can't control, what your local conservation officer decides to interpret, but without him seizing the bike, it'd be almost impossible for them to win it in front of, because it'd just be his opinion of how many watts the bike is, and the bike's not there. I mean, it's in the law. You'd have to prove the watts, and the only way to prove the watts would be somebody smarter than myself hooking something up to the bike to figure out exactly what it's running at.
A lot of gray area there. So much gray.
Oh yeah. I mean, I work in tobacco enforcement, and there's a bunch of regulations going through right now with our statutes, and they're pretty much rewriting the whole thing. So like, I know exactly what you're talking about with the e-bikes and the regulations, and redoing everything pretty much. And it's just,
it's the same thing. Like if you wrote somebody a ticket for tobacco, you'd have to seize the tobacco, because at court you'd have to prove that it's tobacco, because if it's not tobacco, the case is no good. So it's just that's why the easiest way to do it would be the speed limit, because then I mean, radar enforcement's established by the Supreme Court, and if they got you on a radar gun and could articulate that you were utilizing the power of the motor to get to that speed, that would be a good ticket, compared to if they're going to start arguing watt levels. And the watts is a goofy thing too, because like the way, like the power of bicycles or cars is calculated. I mean, technically a 50-watt motor and a 50-watt motor in the rear and the front, those numbers typically in vehicles would be added together. There's been nothing said about that in regards to, a lot of the dual hub motor bikes.
that's true, because you can have two different motors on it. You can have a lower motor on the front and a bigger motor on the back for those.
Yeah, a lot of them are like dual 500 watts, or they can put different motors. But if like you put, let's say, and this is why like cars don't have, horsepower. Like I don't care if it's 1,000 horsepower Mustang. If he doesn't exceed the speed limit, it makes no difference to me how powerful the motor is.
Right.
And if you all of a sudden did want to limit that, well, if you had a 500 horsepower motor turning the front tires and a 500 horsepower motor turning the rear tires, it'd be 1,000 horsepower vehicle.
Right. Yeah, I do agree. They should just make it a speed limit, and that's it the whole way through.
Yeah, because what do you care? What do you care about the watts?
I mean that's the main thing. One, you can't have, it's electric bike, so it's not leaving fumes all over the place when you're driving through game land, state forest, national forest, whatever. Like, you're not leaving fumes behind. So make it a speed limit, just like you do. I think it's in Maine. I watched that one TV show with the Rangers up there, and they always pull people over with like the ATVs on the back road, like when they're going a certain speed limit. Like when they're going wherever the speed limit, they pull them over there. Like, do the same thing. Like, that's
makes no sense. And I actually talked to like our local conservation officers. I'm actually going to sell a couple bikes to them, and I asked them, I was like, "What are you guys doing with these with these laws?" He's like, "We don't do anything. You got no idea what's going on." So it'd be dependent. I mean, I think everybody, you could have your local conservation officer or state trooper who's a go-getter, maybe likes to write bad tickets, but I mean, it's terribly written, and it's what happens when legislatures, they write laws that sound good on paper, and then they get real tricky when it comes to enforcement, and they're going to have to definitely clean it up. Otherwise, like, you can't win these cases in front of magistrates or judges who are looking at the different elements to the offense, and
Mhm.
you have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
Mhm.
You're not gonna be able to hit that threshold by saying, I think it was
Right.
a 1,000-watt motor.
Yeah. And on the motors, does it say like on the bike anywhere? Does it say like 1,000 watts, 750 watt, 500 watts? Does it say that anywhere? Like on the motor, like is it motors in like inside the bike? Obviously, it's like
Yeah, you can't really see it. Like you could look at two bikes, and even I couldn't tell you what, like,
Right.
especially if it's encased, like you'd have no idea. I
Yeah.
mean, some of them maybe, but I mean, you can hook computers up to these motors and change all kinds of settings on them. So it's a programmable motor.
Right.
As far as I understand, I mean, a lot of this is way outside of, not my knowledge base, but all I know is with the bikes that I sell, if you go into the settings, especially with the one display, like if you drop the speed limit to 20 miles per hour
Mhm.
right on the display, it has like a dial, and the dial changes from, I think, 1,500 watts. And then once you go in the settings, it says 750 watts right on the screen.
Mhm.
So if anybody was worried about getting checked, it'd be as simple as them looking at the screen, and the screen says 750 watts.
Okay.
And then my single speed bikes are actually, they're not even mechanically capable of exceeding 20 miles per hour. Their max speed 16. So,
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, that'd be another thing where it'd be, I mean, impossible. And that'd be a simple mathematical equation where you could prove that bike, based on the gearing, cannot turn a 26-inch rim
Right.
to exceed 20 miles per hour based on, the RPMs.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the laws have to get rewritten if you want to enforce them more. I mean, that's just how it is. Like, but you got to stay on the roads. Like, makes sense to me. Like staying on the roads, the already man-made roads, makes sense. Because that was been my thoughts. Like, okay, like where I want to go is usually off the path anyway. But do you have yours? Do they have? I know a lot of bikes have walk assist. So like if you're going through the woods, you can have the bike go up the hill as you're walking beside it.
Yep, all my bikes have that. And that's
Okay.
just a function of those motors. So basically there's only, for hunting e-bikes right now, there's only one company that's making the motors, and it's Bafang. So like my Bafang motors are the exact same Bafang motors that Quiet Cat, Rambo, Baku, they all do the same thing.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing unique about the motors they're using, and my batteries are basically the exact same ones too, to where my batteries would most likely fit into their bikes, and vice versa.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because that's one thing that I think is very useful is that walk assist. Because like when I was walking my mountain bike, and my wife gave me a deadline of how long I could be out there, and I obviously went too far in, I went too far, and I was like, well, crap, I got to go the whole way around, or I can cut through the woods right here and walk up this steep hill. And man, that was a bitch with a mountain bike, no walk assist, obviously. And I'm like going over these logs, like throwing my bike over the log. I'm like, damn it, like this is too much. I'm like, I get to the top, like I have this much water left, like I have a little bit of water left. I'm like, man, I still got to walk the whole way back to my truck yet. Yeah, so that was a rough time, and now I know not to go in there when I have that amount of time I can only be out in the woods.
Yeah. You lose track of time pretty easy
yeah.
when you're in the woods.
Yeah.
There's times where I look at my phone, I'm like, oh, it's already this late.
Mhm.
I need to start heading back, or it's going to be dark.
Yeah.
Before I even get back to the vehicle. I'm like, all right. So text my wife, hey, I am leaving the woods. I promise. I'm not. It might be a little later than I intended.
Yeah.
Please don't be too mad at me.
Yeah.
Coming home late.
Getting in there is easy. You just go, especially when you're going downhill the whole time. Like you just ride the bike straight downhill the whole time. But then getting out is the hard part, because you're like, oh man, now I got to climb all these hills again.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah, the bikes are nice, air conditioned ride back to your truck. Yeah.
yes.
And
Stay cool in the morning. Don't get all sweaty.
Yeah. And then
they're an awesome tool. Like
Mhm.
if you've never used them, you don't quite understand how beneficial they are. And then once you start using them, you can't even imagine not having them as a tool. That totally changes how you look at hunting different spots and doing different things, whether it's, kind of disguising where you're parking your truck and driving it, or accessing spots that were just too much work to, hunt. Everybody can hunt a hard spot one time, but hunting a hard spot multiple days, that tests you. So the bikes just make your life a lot easier.
Oh yeah. Speaking of disguising, how creative do you get when it comes to you take your e-bike, you get to your spot? How creative do you get when it comes to hiding that thing in case somebody else comes along, or you don't want just an animal finding it, kind of deal?
I'll usually park it, a mile or so away, just because if people see your truck parked in a certain spot more than, sometimes even just one time, but multiple times, I mean, you're looking for company. So I'll park it, even if there's a parking lot real close, I won't even use that one. Like I'll park further away and kind of misrepresent where I'm at, and then drive the bike. And I just have a cheap lock. I might lock it to a tree, or, I usually throw it under a bush, or I kind of have those saddlebags that fit on the back where I have one of those camouflage sheets or whatever if I really had to disguise it. But I've never had any problem with the bike. I mean, if you hide it fairly well, I don't think anybody's going to find it. And then, a lot of guys, like I had one guy who bought a bike for me last year, and he was parking the bike like right at the base of the tree, and he didn't notice any problems as long as the bike was laid down compared to upright. The deer didn't bother. He ended up shooting a really big buck on a day where he got off work late. He was pushed for time, and the only reason he thought he could get to the spot was because the bike was gonna get him there a lot quicker. So he decided to hunt that spot, and then within the first 5 minutes of being in the tree, ended up shooting that deer. So that's definitely a case where the bike was a big part of him being able to harvest that buck.
Oh yeah. Oh crap. Who did I talk? It wasn't here. No, it wasn't here. I'm just trying to remember like who I was talking to. I think it was a guy up at the cabin, had a bike. I don't think it was an e-bike or anything, but he had a bike, and he would always park it underneath the tree stand, or wherever whatever tree he was at, he would always park it underneath every single time, so that when the deer came in, they might have they got a whiff maybe of him or something, but that they see the bike. So they associate the smell with that bike, and they look at the bike and like, oh, that bike, that's not a threat. I can see it. It's not doing anything. So they ignore it. And he said he's killed deer that way, and he's doesn't use any scent killer, cover scents, nothing. He just puts the bike or whatever he's riding in right underneath the tree that he's hunting out of, and the deer like, oh, that thing is what smells like that. I'm okay. So I was like, oh, that's because I was like, how close do you park the e-bike? Do you keep it away? Do you keep it close? But I guess that's a personal preference at that point, where you want.
Yeah, I usually park mine further away, but whatever's working, if it's working for him, then no reason to switch it.
Yeah, because then you got to remember where you put it.
Yeah,
Like where did I hid this thing a little too well?
Yeah, exactly. So how quiet are the bikes? Like that's because like you still have the chains on it, so all that kind of stuff. So like, how quiet are these bike going through the woods?
I mean, they're pretty much like a standard bicycle, I guess.
Yeah.
The one benefit of those single speed bikes is without the derailleur, you don't get any of that chain noise of the chain going through the derailleur, or flexing down and hitting the frame of the bike. So those bikes are extremely quiet.
Okay.
And then most of the motors are pretty quiet. Like the one bikes that run, there's a Bafang torque sensing 1,000-watt mid-drive ultra motor.
Okay.
And that one has all steel gears, so it's a little bit louder, especially at higher RPMs compared to the other one has nylon gears, and they're quieter. But in general, I mean, the deer don't. If you're riding them, they'll most of the time just look at you and let you go by.
Okay. Yeah, because that was my one thing I was wondering was like, so you have these chains. Why is there no one making like rubber or nylon type chains yet? You know, like, is that something that you think could possibly be down the road for these bikes to make them even more quiet?
There's a couple companies that are using a belt drive.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's an expensive part, and the belt is a solid belt. So if you think of how, how the frames are configured, you have to have a certain frame where the belt will fit in there.
Right.
Because usually like a chain comes apart and then it threads through, the triangular part of the back of the frame. And that's how it attaches. So you have to have specifically designed frames to handle the belt drives, and then the belt system with the internally geared hub they have is an expensive part. So
yeah,
the belt system can be $1,500 to $2,000. So it ends up being costs. I mean,
yeah,
the easiest thing for me to do would be to build a bike that costs $10,000 that has everything everybody wants. But
right.
you kind of have to fight the battles that are worth fighting and try to, get the cost to a reasonable amount where, I mean, even where they're at now, they're extremely expensive. So, keeping that as low as possible. And then, if guys are interested in upgrading certain parts, they can do it on their own. Cause I mean, you could put $1,500 rims and wheels on a bike. But, if I did that to the bikes I'm selling and the price jumps up, then, they become less attractive. So you kind of have to, direct the value into certain areas that you're worried could potentially fail and is a part that would be difficult for the average consumer to fix. You kind of make them as strong as you can while keeping the price as reasonable as possible.
Oh yeah. So what about the tires now? So let's talk about the tires. Like, what kind of tires are being put on these? Is it fat tires?
So all my bikes are fat tires.
Okay.
The one bikes have 4-inch. So anywhere from, it's either a 4-inch tire, a 4.5-inch tire, or 4.8-inch tire. And the fat tires typically give you a better ride just because there's more air, more cushion, to where, with most fat tire bikes, it's not that critical to have a full suspension. All my bikes have a front suspension, but you have those big tires, and those big tires can, go over mud, handle snow. Because the original fat bikes were started in northern Minnesota to be used in the winter. Okay. So that was the whole reason for the design. And then taking that into hunting to where you're in a muddy field or going into snow or sand or anything like that, you get a lot of flotation, and the tires work really good. And then I also sell, there's a company called Tanis that has it's a foam insert for the tire, and the foam is basically, I think it's a 1/2 inch to 1 inch maybe, but if a nail penetrated through the tire, it would go into the foam before it penetrated into the inner tube.
Okay.
So it gives you a little bit of protection, especially guys who go out west with goat heads and different things that, might penetrate a 1/2 inch or so. That's going to keep you from getting a flat. And then there's another company that's kind of an injectable sealant, flat out, where if you ran those two products, you'd probably be 99.9% safe from getting any type of failure from a puncture, to where guys obviously don't want to get stranded out in the middle of nowhere. And
Right.
Yeah.
and you can do, you could be almost certain that if you do those two things that you should be okay.
Yeah. How deep of water can you go through with an e-bike?
They're, I guess we'll call them water resistant, not waterproof. So you don't want them fully submerged. But I've crossed, creeks that were like a foot deep or whatever. And last year I was driving through a flooded swamp that had, waist high grass and probably 10 inches of water. And
oh, wow.
It would go right through that. So
Nice.
It's impressive what they'll go through.
That is. Because, you think e-bike, okay, probably shouldn't go through water with it. But then you also think the battery and the motor is enclosed, or the motor is enclosed, the battery's on the outside, right? So if you can take the battery on and off.
Yeah, the battery's on the down tube. So the motor there's some connections down in the base which would be right about where the pedals attached to the bottom of the frame.
Okay.
So I think, I'm just looking at a tire right now. That's probably like 16 inches to the ground. So you'd probably have, 12, 16 inches to work with before the motor would start being submerged.
Yeah.
And then the battery itself, the spot where the battery connects to the motor is on the highest part of the battery. So that's closer to like the handlebars, the only exposed connection up that high. Okay. So they can sit in the rain, and the connections are supposed to be waterproof. You obviously don't want to submerge it, but they can handle a fair amount.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we could have crossed on a day that it didn't rain. We could have crossed the creek at your cabin.
That's what I was thinking of. Probably not.
Yeah.
I don't know if
as long as it didn't rain a lot, because there was some sketchy stuff even with the truck.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There was sketchy stuff with the truck. When it goes over the hood of the truck, you probably shouldn't be crossing that creek.
No.
Yeah, probably not.
No.
And then you got to watch. I'll walk it across a lot. Just if you get those slippery rocks, you're going to end up on your side.
Yeah.
So
you got to figure, like, you're carrying your rifle, or you're carrying your bow, like you're carrying your pack, tree stands, like all that kind of stuff. Like, you don't want to cross something and you take a spill. Like I think that's my biggest fear. Like, that's of riding anything in, or like just like falling with my bow or stand or whatever. Like it's that's expensive gear you're carrying in there.
Oh yeah.
That's
speaking of falling, so you want to see where you're going. Obviously we all go out at dark o'clock, in the morning to go set up. Do you have lights? Are there lights on the bikes in the front at all, or do you have to bring wear a headlamp or something when you're going in?
So it comes with a headlight that's basically wired into your display, where at the handlebars there's some buttons you can push to get the headlight to turn on.
Okay.
And the headlight they comes with is maybe, I'd have to guess here, it might be like 500 lumens. So it's a decent light. If you need it, it'll help you. I usually put an aftermarket light, and then I actually sell some on the website where you can buy lights up to 300 or 3,500 lumens.
Okay.
So you can have, pretty much a vehicle headlight on there if that's what you need to.
Yeah.
You obviously, when you're driving through the woods, you want to be able to see what's coming and make sure you can navigate that way. So there are aftermarket lights and different things that guys can buy. I usually run the one aftermarket light, and then I may or may not have my headlamp on.
Yeah.
And I'm coming back at night.
Okay.
And then there's taillights on the bikes too. So, I mean, depending on if you're going to be driving down the highway, you know, you might get a better light if you want to make sure that people can see you from the rear.
Yeah.
How long does it take to charge a battery? Like if it's completely dead, how long does it usually take to charge that battery up?
I'd say around 6 hours with the chargers that come with it. You can buy a better charger to where it's just how they're rated. So they come with a 2-amp charger.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I think that's, so 2-amp charger, I'm pretty sure, I think that it'll charge 2 amps per hour. So if you have, you know, a 16 amp hour battery that's totally drained, it would take 8 hours to change that. But if you bumped it up to running a 4-amp charger, then it would only take 4 hours to charge it.
Okay.
It depends on your charger. Some of my bikes come with 2-amp charger, and then one of the bikes comes with a 5-amp charger. So
okay,
you can, and then that's something you can buy aftermarket, and you know, depending on what you need. But usually it's where I get home in the evening and I'll throw it on the charger and it's charged by morning.
Okay. Now, what about, because I think the most important thing is the seat. When you're riding in, you want a nice seat to ride in on. You don't want to be riding in some hard seat. So, like, is a seat like one of those things you can upgrade over time, or do they come with pretty comfortable seats?
They come with pretty good seats.
Okay.
Like two of the bikes, I'd probably would never even think of upgrading the seat. And then one of the other seats, still a comfortable seat, but if you wanted to have, you know, a bigger seat, it could be something you could upgrade. But
yeah,
the seats are generally pretty good.
Okay.
Like, not like you know, I think we've all seen the standard bike seats. That's just the Tour de France nightmare seat.
Oh, God.
They don't have those, so they have pretty good seats.
Okay, good. Me and my wife went on for her birthday, I think it was last year, we went to Ohio Pile out near Pittsburgh here in PA. And we went for I think it was all around trip. I think it was a 20-mile bike ride. And it was all flat pretty much, but these seats sucked. So I think they weren't fat tire bikes. I think they were mountain bikes. No, they might have been fat tire bikes. We rode the whole way across this nice trail, but it was like rocky. But yet, man, like my ass hurt after that. Like I was walking weird the next 2 days. Like it was a weird feeling. I was like, man, if we do this again, we're bringing our own bikes with nice seats. We're gonna
rent a bike and bring your own seat.
Yeah.
BYOC or bring your own seat. BYOS.
There you go.
Bring your own seat. There we go. Yeah. So what else did we miss? Anything to cover about e-bikes that you think the listeners should know about before they go look at any e-bike?
Yeah, I guess just do your research, because probably half the bikes I sell are to guys who buy, you know, whatever bike and then realize it's not going to do what they want it to do.
Yeah.
So even buying a cheap bike would be the $1,500 to $2,000 range.
Yeah.
So almost none of those bikes are going to climb much for hills. You know, they can, if you're just a guy who's flatland checking trail cameras and using it here or there, I mean, that can be perfectly fine for what you need.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest thing is when guys who think they're going to climb hills and buy one of those bikes, you know, they end up being very disappointed. And then, you know, all that money they thought they saved, you know, depending on what they can resell the bike for, is lost. So, I mean, if you think you're going to have a bike do, you know, some serious stuff, it's probably going to be a more expensive bike. And my bikes start at, the cheapest one's $3,000 and up to $3,700. That's kind of where my bikes fall.
Okay.
And then those are obviously similar to what some other companies have for, you know, in the $5,500 range.
Right.
But just look at the motors, make sure you're getting good batteries, and, you know, make sure you get what you want. I mean, I have no problem guys calling me up, and because I want to make sure everybody gets what they want. I don't want people who are disappointed. And
Right.
if what you want is not what I'm selling, then I much rather have you buy what you want from somebody else than just buy a bike from me and not be happy. But I mean, everybody's been really happy with the product that I'm putting out there. And if anybody has any questions, they can definitely give me a call and we can figure it out.
Yeah. What's your biggest advice to hunters now? Like, what's your biggest hunting advice to someone?
I think you gotta find your own way to get things done. I mean, there's a lot of different podcasts, and you could have 12 different people on your podcast, and they're going to have 12 different ways that they're shooting deer. But you have to find what fits your style. And for some guys, it's going 2 miles deep. And for other guys, I'm not going to do that. I want to hunt easier spots. Well, there's plenty of easy spots. You just got to look for those spots. So just kind of take what information you have and shape it to what you're doing. And usually the hardest buck to kill is the first one, because as soon as you kill the first one, then you just recreate the lesson plan and just do it from there.
Yeah, exactly. And it's been awesome talking to you, learn about e-bikes, because we knew nothing about it coming in. And I feel like I learned a lot more just from this hour and 10-minute conversation. It has been great.
Well, yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, and answer anybody's questions they have. I want to make sure everybody gets what they want.
Yeah. One more time, let them know where they can follow you at, where they can reach out to you, all that kind of good stuff.
So it'd be the website, stealthhuntingebikes.com. And then on Facebook, look up Stealth Hunting E-Bikes. And I try to post stuff periodically. So like that and follow it, and you'll get any sales that are going on or different e-bike topics. And then I also have a Instagram page, which is Stealth Hunting. I think it's at Stealth Hunting, but if you looked up Stealth Hunting E-Bikes, it'd probably pop up. But you can get a hold of me on any of the messenger through Facebook or Instagram, or my telephone number's on the website. So feel free, give me a call.
All right.
Sweet.
Thank you. Hopefully you have a good, hopefully this next season you can get that buck down.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Good luck, man.
Thanks, you too.
See ya.
Thanks.